The Sefer Albo, the Sefer Ikrim by Rabbi Yosef Albo, latter day Rishon, makes the case that there's a defense of Klal Yisrael that complained for the lack of water in the Midbar, their critique of Moshe Rabbeinu, that he's the manig, he's the leader, he's taking them into a place where there is no water, and he has to anticipate that they're going to need it. There's going to be a certain level of urgency. And there was a certain validity, not the manner in which they did it necessarily, obviously, but there was a certain substance to the content of their critique. Most of the Rishonim and early Achronim differ with the Albo, and they said Moshe Rabbeinu, the particular critique was that he delayed to go and consult with the Rebbeinu Shalom. They should have immediately swung into action and anticipated the problem without having to consult. Does not necessary in such a situation to consult. That it's obvious that they're going to need drink. Meshech Chochmah takes up on behalf of the Sefer Ikrim, and he says if you study all of the issues, and friction, fractiousness of Klal Yisrael in the Dora Midbar, the sequence of events, Moshe Rabbeinu always consults. This situation wasn't different. There's one time where he doesn't consult, and that's last week's Parashat, Korach, the Parashat of Korach. Moshe Rabbeinu immediately sets the plan for the confrontation, for the decisive confrontation that will make the determination who is the leader. No consultation. Halodovahu needs to be understood, says the Meshech Chochmah. Moshe Rabbeinu goes out of his way demonstratively, in a very, very high-profile manner, to consult so that he should never be thought of as the source of the miraculous providential guidance that has been with them, has guided them through Mitzrayim, through the Midbar, all of the miracles that took place. Moshe Rabbeinu wants it to be clear that there should not be that kind of reductionism to which psychologically can happen. People fix on a person and connect it to the person who is the medium of expediting the hashkocha nisit, the miraculous providence, and especially with the consistency and regularity of, with all the critique, there is that danger as well. So every time Moshe Rabbeinu very, very clearly goes to consult. One time he does not consult. By Korach, that's the only time he doesn't consult. He immediately says, these are going to be the givens. The earth opens up, swallows up Korach, fire. he sets the ground rules for the court of decision. Not going to be any appeals here. Hello, Dovo, says the Meshech Chochmah. But since Moshe Rabbeinu's prime motivating force in, yes, consulting all the time, was to rebut any kind of havamim, any kind of consideration on the part of the people that he is the source from which this miraculous providential guidance emanates. In this case, in the case of Korach, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have that problem because they're challenging him anyway. So they're trying to undermine his authority. He's looked at as someone who is not the source. So by Korach, he doesn't have to consult. But, says the Meshech Chochmah, the point of the Sefer Ikrim, of the Book of Essences, of Rabbi Yosef Halbo, that latter-day Rishon, when he said Moshe Rabbeinu should have anticipated that there would be now a new level of critique, because once he set, this is post-Korach, the sequence of events, with now the talking to the stone, with consulting, getting instructions from a Kodesh Baruch Hu. There's a delay here, and because of this delay, it revved up, intensified the critique. Moshe Rabbeinu should have anticipated that since this problem is psychologically in the basic attitude, unconscious of man, to want to, in a state of frustration, of stress, to find some source, like it, similar to the idea of a scapegoat, but find some source to put blame. So now that Moshe Rabbeinu set a new precedent that it is possible not to consult. Surely there was a rationale, there were reasons here not to consult by Korach, because there's no risk that they're going to think Moshe Rabbeinu is the source of the miracle. But now there's a post-Korach world, in a post-Korach world, that Moshe Rabbeinu has set that precedent, that it's possible for him to swing into action immediately. So then, as a manhig, he should have anticipated that there's going to be a digging in to that unconscious, and now utilizing this critique as, wait a minute, when it was relevant to your authority, to your position, you didn't wait to consult with the Rebbeinu Shalom immediately. You were proactive in the most extraordinary manner. Immediately you said, this will be the decisive factors that will show who is the leader. Such and such will happen to the earth, and as we spoke about recently, swallow you up. Without consultation, no risk there. But once that precedent has been established, as a leader, he could have, should have understood that there'll be a certain percentage of the population likely to be more vocal, likely to be more critical, reducing it to its lowest common denominator and saying, when it was pertained to your authority, you immediately acted without delay, without consultation. Now, when we had no water, and you waited to consult, got instructions from the Rebbeinu Shalom, speak to the stone, and what happened that instead of speaking, he wound up hitting it hitting the stone because of the anger, and the key then will be that there's a new precedent. It's a different world.
Moshe Rabbeinu is then charged. The Rebbeinu Shalom, they bowed down. They turned to the Rebbeinu Shalom. They now asked that Vayovo Moshe v'Aaron mipnei hakol el Pesach ol Moed v'yiplo al pneihem, and then the Rebbeinu Shalom appears to them. The Rebbeinu Shalom instructs Moshe Rabbeinu to speak to the cello, the familiar sequence that we know that Moshe Rabbeinu, instead of speaking, he winds up hitting the cellar, hitting the boulder a number of times, and many pshatim and angles of perception of what transpired, of how and why that took place. The Rebbeinu Shalom instructed him to speak to the cellar, v'hishkisos ha'eda v'es be'iram. You will then have enough to give drink, to quench the thirst of the community and of their cattle. Masher Chochmah is medayek that later, when after Moshe Rabbeinu has gotten angry and responded to their frustration and their impatience, the community, the tzibur, that is facing, confronting them. It says, "Vayetzu mayim rabim v'teish ha'ede u'be'irom." It says much water came out, and great quantities of water, and it was enough for them and for their cattle. But initially it said, "Es ha'eda v'es be'irom," them and their cattle, two separate categories. Now it's equating them, says the Meshech Chochmah, that it'll be large amounts of water will be needed for them and for the cattle. They put it on the same level. Initially, there's a special bracha that a man whose soul dominates his existence and guides his body, is he a physiologically needing creature? Yes, but the soul is in control. Then he follows the premise that Chazal has taught us, that Hakimo Mizborech B'Meyov, that a minimal amount of food and water can suffice for somebody whose soul dominates his body. The cattle would need much water. So there were two separate categories. There would be the Hishkiso Es Ha'eda ve'es be'irom, They're two separate categories. But now, once that has been established, that they have been reduced now to giving the priority to their physical need, so now they are reduced to the level of the cattle, and it'll be vayetzu mayim rabim, and much water would now be needed, and vatesht, to quench the thirst of the people and of their cattle. They're not two separate categories. The Pasuk says, vatesht ha'edav biram, this time. Meshech Chochmah continues and says that this was an opportunity that the Rebbeinu Shalom wanted Moshe Rabbeinu to utilize to reinforce the miracle that had been experienced at Sinai of seeing the sounds. That for some reason, Moshe Rabbeinu is asked now that miracle of Royim Asakolos, seeing the sounds, should be a miracle that will be with Klal Yisrael, will join them, escort them through history. And now, had Moshe Rabbeinu spoken to the seller, had he spoken to that boulder, instead of hitting the seller, it's an equal miracle. What difference does it make? The seller is not the source of the water. Somehow the water is coming to the seller in the midbar, in this boulder, but not something one could have anticipated. It is miraculous, but we needed here, says the Meshech Chochmah, Klal Yisrael needed this reinforcement of that miracle, that would be a miracle. Royim Asakol is seeing the sounds that would have to be with Klal Yisrael as a constant revisiting of the extraordinary experience of the moment of the encounter at Sinai. And in fact, the psukim here indicate that Moshe Rabbeinu was being, the Rebbeinu Shalom says to Moshe Rabbeinu, V'aron achicha v'dibaltem, and you should speak el hasela le'eineihem, to their eyes, because it would have been, had the words, though it was an equal miracle, that the hitting the stone, which is not a well, it's merely a stone that doesn't contain water, that had you spoken to the seller, it would have been a revisiting of that le'eineihem, dibur le'eineihem, that miracle. Question then is, what is the significance of that miracle being with Klal Yisrael and joining them through history? That moment, it needed the reinforcement, but then again and again. We've touched on various angles of how to approach and understand this phenomenon, but again and again we come back to the idea that there's no such thing as a miracle which is a wasted miracle. It was needed then at Sinai, and now if it was needed here to reinforce Klal Yisrael in carrying this with them. Many reasons to understand. We have fundamental differences between seeing and hearing. Seeing, I can see you from a distance. Hearing, one must be close. What can one expect of someone who was brought up in a home and an environment, in a community where he did not hear the sounds of Torah? His father, perhaps even his grandfather, did not learn, didn't daven. He was removed from it. One has to be close to hear. Shmiya needs proximity, requires proximity. Seeing, I can see you from a distance. So the Ribbono Shel Olam at Sinai built in to the nature of Klal Yisrael that neshama guf interaction, that peculiar kind of providence that would give the possibility to the Jew through Torah to transcend being governed by his body. The body is not sovereign. Necessary, yes. Sovereignty, no. And that medium, it's a medium for interacting with the world and providing the Kiddush Hashem, the Kvod Shemayim, that man has been assigned and delegated to bring to this earthly existence. And so, the Ribbono Shel Olam gave every Jew at Sinai the possibility of seeing the sounds, that even if somebody wasn't close, he can see what has been achieved, what has been accomplished, been wrought by these sounds. Again and again, we come back to the idea of the uniqueness of the Torah community. Again, we know we have our warts, we have our scars, we have our failings. Nobody has a monopoly on people that can misbehave, can be lunatics, can be a lunatic fringe, but our percentages are extraordinary. The amount of chesed is something which is not seen or heard of anywhere in the world, that the food distribution, the medical equipment, the hospitals, the millions and millions and hundreds of millions of dollars dedicated by every frum community to helping all others, including those who are remote from behaving as they behave. But Klal Yisrael embraces Klal Yisrael, that in helping to fulfill this mission statement of this unique people, to reinforce this sense of the mission, to be this leadership kind of a core in history, to bring the sense of purposefulness, of morality, man, God, to the world. And so Klal Yisrael will have this special status, and it will need the reinforcement of all the troops, all the potential draftees of Klal Yisrael, whose neshamas were there at that encounter at Sinai, and they are reconvening, as it were, as they did at Sinai, ki ish echad b'lev echad, one man with one heart. And it's only the empirical, experiential reality of participating in this, seeing the sounds, that will help bring together the sense of unity, of oneness, of Klal Yisrael, which in turn will then impact the world community, which is surely our goal of Tikkun Olam, of seeing the entire world. But we have been enfranchised with a certain capacity and a mission. The two must go together. And as such, we're doing the most and the best for the world by fulfilling our Torah mandate of exercising all of the potential of what we have to bring to the Sein Chalkeinu B'Seresecha, our piece, our part of that action of the total picture of Torah consciousness, awareness, behavior on this spinning orbit called Earth and earthliness, to raise it above, to help rise above that earthliness. It's going to happen through Klal Yisrael's mandate and fulfillment of that mandate. Hashem Yitain that we should see, hear those Bsorot Tovot, and